Hello and welcome back to Ashley Made Makes. So today we are making a Modcloth inspired skirt out of some beautiful vintage fabric. I have worn this style of skirt for years. It consists of a smooth pleated front, elasticated back, and some great slash pockets, meaning it looks both very polished and professional to me, but also it is extremely comfortable and great for if you do have to sit at a desk all day, or even things like trips or business trips. I've used it on a lot. And it's something I haven't really made before, which is odd considering it's something I wear probably at least weekly. So I thought I would walk you guys through the process of making it today. It makes a really good beginner project, and especially for people that are a little intimidated by using paper patterns. This is all without paper. I'm just using my measurements and I'm drafting the whole thing, and I'll walk you through start to finish. So this is a really simple project. That being said, if you are more experienced, like I say, I think this is a workhorse skirt. I think it's a workhorse basic. And it utilizes like a fairly small amount of fabric for how much skirt you get. And I think it's a great scrap buster for special fabric or fabrics that have directional patterns, things like that, where you might not be able to use them. So if you'd like to see this, let's get into it. To get started, I thought I would show you guys the skirt that I'm basing this project on. So this skirt was originally from Modcloth, and as you may or may not be able to tell, it's seen a little bit of better days. It's definitely got like some pilling going on. There's some catches in the fabric, that sort of thing. It's starting to definitely reach the end of its life. It definitely doesn't look as nice as it used to, but I love this skirt. This is a super simple skirt to recreate, so I thought I would go ahead and do that because it should only be a few hours worth of work, and I'll basically have a replacement for this skirt. All it consists of is a flat front. So we've just got a flat front with some pleats here. The pleats are, I think they're about a half an inch. Yeah, so the pleats are about a half an inch, and they're pleated away from, there's like a center box pleat, and then they're pleated away from that. We have a couple of belt loops, and then we have a pseudo slash pocket. So we have this sort of J-shaped pocket. I think I might do just a regular slash for my purposes, just because I don't like the effect that you can kind of see how that creates like kind of this divot over time. And then the back is just elastic, so that makes it really comfortable. And again, you can see that more of that kind of pilling. Yeah, it's getting a little nasty in its old age, but so this is kind of what I'm after. This skirt looks like, I believe it's about 60 inches wide when I measured. So it would have been a standard fabric size. So probably would have been made of about 2 yards of a 60-inch wide fabric. So bang on, would have been a 60-inch wide fabric. This is the fabric I'm going to be using. So this is also a polyester, but it's actually a vintage polyester from the 70s. I got this from Tanya on Instagram. So she was having a bit of a stash sale, and I bought this off of her because I just thought it was very cool and very much looks like 70s film. Obviously this print is very directional, so the print runs up and down, and I have just shy of 3 yards of it here. So this is kind of the perfect thing to make this type of skirt, just because I don't have a ton of it and it requires something that's cut in straight panels. So this is a really great project for that. If you have anything like that that runs up and down, if I had made like a circle or something, the problem with that would be like out towards the edge, my buildings would be horizontal. So less than desirable. Probably not as bad in this one as it would be in other things, but this skirt makes a great project for directional prints. This fabric, because it is vintage, is only about 45 inches wide. So I want to get as much floof as possible. So I'll actually be cutting 3 panels, and then I'm going to split one down the middle and attach that. So I can use as much of this fabric as I can. This would be bordering on a zero waste project, depending on how you do it. So again, a great use of special fabric. So the first thing I'm going to look at here is to see if this will tear for me. It looks like it might. If it can tear on the grain, that is ideal for this project, because that would mean that my panels will be super ultra straight. Maybe mixed. If I was making this out of a cotton or something, it would definitely rip a little bit easier, but we're probably gonna sacrifice an inch or two here just to see if it will, just to give us a nice fresh edge here. Oh, Oh, yep. See, and it's a good thing we did because that looks like it was uneven. So, because I'm coming off the edge here, so I'll need to sacrifice a little bit more. So that appears to be the slanted end. Oh, but it looks like we did meet our other ripped edge. So cool. You definitely don't want something like this cut off grain because then your whole skirt will hang slightly crooked, especially when it's so simple like this with just a few panels. So let me just double check here. I'm gonna double check against this skirt, taking my side seam here. So this skirt is about 27 inches in total, which actually works out to be pretty much my perfect skirt length. That's usually what I cut my skirts to, so that works out well. Explains another reason why I like these skirts, but so I will probably cut this to 30-inch panels so that I have enough to give myself a 2-inch hem and actually attach the skirt to the waistband and everything. So I am gonna be doing this project with 1/2-inch seam allowance just to keep the math easy, but you do you. And again, if you want this shorter than this, longer than this, totally doesn't matter. You know, even if you wanted to do like a cosplay or an anime skirt, make it really short, you definitely could do that. If you want to be Sailor Moon for Halloween, totally doable. So I'm just going to, this is doing everything in its power to slide off my table. The nice thing about being able to tear it is I can just snip it, rip my panel. Now I am getting obviously some stray threads there, but I'm not gonna cry about that. Again, I'd rather have it be straight. And this will all get caught up in the seam allowances. 1/2 inch is fairly large seam allowance, so I'm not too worried about it. Again, if you want a Bernadette banner and pull threads, you're more than welcome, but ain't nobody got time for that, honestly. Especially on this casual skirt project, that's only gonna take a few hours. All right, so there's my first panel. This fabric is actually only about 45 inches wide. So it's not as wide as my 60-inch fabric that my regular skirt's made out of, but I have almost 3 yards versus the 2, so I'll be able to cut out 3 panels worth. And you can of course add more panels to this too if you wanted to, say, make it 4 yards wide or 5 yards wide, 6 yards wide. When you start getting into that territory, you can get into doing, like, you know, you can get a very historical look for your skirt if you want. Because most of those historical skirts are just panels like this too. What I'm actually going to do is cut 3 panels and then I'm going to cut them in half here and then sew them back together to give me 2 big panels. They'll be about 65 inches wide, I think I calculated when all's said and done. But so I just double checked the waistband here and I have some 1.5-inch elastic here, and that seems to match up perfectly. And the way this waistband is constructed is all in one piece. There's no seam along this top part here. There is on the front, but I think in our case, like, why do that? So this is all constructed in one piece. So what you're going to look at is 1/2 inch plus 1/2 inch is 3 inches plus 1 inch of seam allowance. And I always like to leave, when I'm inserting elastic, 0.25 for elastic wiggle room. So that leaves us with 4.25 as our waistband. So again, I'm going to nip that right there, 4.25. And I'm gonna need the same of interfacing for the front half of the waistband. So I'll go ahead and do that, probably off camera here, but that's our front. And then I'll do the same again here. So I'm just gonna go, although, hold on. I'm running dangerously low out of fabric here, so I might want to be a little bit careful. Normally I would probably just rip the same. So I misspoke here. So this will actually be the back half of my waistband that goes the entire width of the fabric to gather our elastic into. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do half of my waist measurement plus, again, 1 inch for seam allowance. Since I'm running very, very low on fabric. Not quite 3 yards. 3 yards probably would have been perfect. But you know, you make do. And I want this skirt to be as fluffy as I can make it. So same thing again, 4.25 for our front waistband. Because this is what we're going to pleat down to. So we're going to pleat down to half our waist. And then the back, of course, is elastic. If you wanted to make it all elastic, you're totally able to, or if you wanted to make it all pleats, you totally can as well. I like the look of the flat front and the comfort of the elastic back. I think it's kind of the best of both worlds, but you could definitely just pleat it down, add a zipper. Again, whatever you want to do. This is very, very flexible. so there's my front waistband. So this is actually the piece that'll get interfaced here. All right, so obviously this little itty bitty chunk, basically all I have left barring that strip. So what was I saying about really low waist project? So obviously this isn't enough to cut 4 of these guys out of. Normally I would just go ahead and cut them all out if I had had the full 3 yards. That's definitely what I would have done. But instead, I'm gonna have to piece this. Like I say, normally I have enough fabric to cut a couple of these guys. Like I say, these are 8 by 13. So if I would have had an extra, basically if I'd had the full 3 yards, that would have been fine. But I don't, so we're gonna go ahead and just cut this so that I can have just the slash part be this fabric. I was just gonna double check. I scrounged this random chunk of yellow fabric. I don't even know what this was from, to be honest. Just gonna double check if you could see this through this. Looks like we're good. I can't really see anything through that, so I think we're fine. So I'm gonna cut my pockets out of this yellow fabric, and I don't even really have enough fabric to cut it this way. Like, I don't technically have enough seam allowance for this part, so I think I am gonna have to cut this on the cross grain, much to my chagrin, but you're only gonna see that like little 2-inch space, so I don't think it's really gonna matter. So I'm gonna cut whole strip. I'm gonna cut 4 inches, so at least I'll have the whole height of the pocket, so I won't have to match this up. Do I have 8 inches? I have exactly 8 inches, guys. Wow. Okay. When you talk low waist, we mean low waist around here. You know, you do what you gotta do with vintage fabric. And could I have made it just 1 panel wide? 100%. I could have just done that. But again, we want maximum floof. We will do what we have to. So this guy. So this is all I have left. Pretty damn good. So I'll take these strips and I'll sew them to, you know, the other half of my pocket lining material, and that'll just be able to cover that little slit area. So all you're gonna see is like that poking out. So I think that'll be totally fine. Might be a little bit weird, but no one's gonna look at me that closely. Like I say, normally you'd have enough fabric just to do that. You know, 3.25 to be on the safe side, something like that. Whatever, this is perfect. We're gonna do it. So there's all our main body. Gonna go ahead and cut 2 full pockets out and 2 with the slash here. And we're gonna go from there. Go ahead and do that off camera. And again, I'm probably just gonna rip these guys. And this is cotton, so this will rip in both directions. So I'm gonna go ahead and rip these guys. And then I will be back. All right, so to get started here, I'm just testing how much heat this polyester can take. So I just tested it on that one little last bit of scrap I had left. And then I'm laying out my interfacing on my front waistband. I like to interface the whole thing just to give it a lot of strength and structure, but you know, a lot of people just do half or whatever, but in this case, doing both, but it wasn't sticking, so I need to have it a little bit hotter. So again, bringing that scrap piece back in, and I'm just testing it here to see if I can make it a little hotter, if it'll stick and it will warp or melt that polyester, and we're good to go. So jumping back onto that waistband, I'm giving that a good bit of heat and I'm pressing that down. Now this looks like I'm dragging it across here in the time lapse, but I'm really just setting it down and letting it sit for a couple seconds in each place. And trimming off the excess of my interfacing, just so that none of it hangs over and sticks to my ironing pad or my iron. That's bad. You don't want to get any glue anywhere when you're melting it. But yeah, just giving that a really solid press on a pretty low iron to not melt this polyester, because it is vintage and who knows how much heat it could take. And so I'm pressing that waistband now in half. I'm going to do a little bit of prep pressing here for later as per my usual method, just to make it a bit easier on myself when it gets to the actual body of the skirt. Again, don't want to be putting too much heat on this if I can help it. So I'm just measuring my 1/2 inch seam allowance there and just pressing one side down, and that'll be the side that flips over to the back. That'll be like the back side that comes over the body of the skirt. Seam allowance. So just giving that a good press down. And then pressing the main back into place. Giving it a solid press. And then we're going to do the same thing on the back waistband, minus the interfacing. So, and as you can tell, this one is way longer. So, just going to go and give that a good press, get it all in place. And then do the same thing and do the seam allowance here. I was obviously missing my ironing guide. Normally I use like my little felt pressing guide, and here I've got like a hem, like a curved hem tool that I'm using. Yeah, not ideal. Wouldn't recommend it. Don't know where my other one is, apparently. Missing your favorite tools, it's a problem. But giving that a good press back in place. And then we're going to be French seaming this whole thing. So I'm starting off with making the pocket that I was short on. So again, an optional step if you'd had enough fabric. So I'm trimming that seam down because we're French seaming. And then I'm giving it a really good press to make sure it's nice and smooth. This is super important when you're doing a French seam, just so that you don't have any lumps and you're not taking in any extra fabric, inadvertently making your seam allowance a lot bigger. And you can see I'm kind of finger pressing it to make sure I'm not catching any extra fabric in that seam. And then we're going to run it through the machine a second time, and that'll encase all my raw edges. This fabric was very fluffy and kind of shreddy, so I really wanted to make sure it was going to hold up. And I wasn't sure if it would hold up to the serger or not, so this seemed like the best idea. So then we're going to go ahead, basically do the same thing to all the skirt panels. So I've got just attaching one to the other, right side to get that French seam started. So I did all 6 panels here, except for the side seam, because that's where we're going to be adding the pockets later. So again, giving that a really good press down, making sure it's all nice and smooth. You can see how awesome this print is for the first time. Making sure I'm using my hands, like I say, getting no extra fabric stuck in that seam. Flipping it around, doing the same thing. Again, checking with my fingers, really trying to like finger press it out as I go with the iron. I find this is really helpful just to take your time here. Just want to really make sure that that's nice and smooth. And then that way you won't catch any raw edges falling out. So then we're going to go back over top. Again, sealing all those yucky raw edges inside. And this is a really strong finish when you're done. It works really well on lightweight fabrics. So I don't know if I do this on fabric much heavier than this, but... And then I'm just cutting that slash off. That's for my pockets, because I left it up until now. And then I'm marking my 1/2 inch seam allowance again along that slash. And I'm using a bit of this strip interfacing. This is kind of a new to me tool, but it's nice to reinforce the slash. Gives me an easy strip to put on this slash to reinforce it, so we don't get that sort of drag that the pockets had on that Modcloth skirt where it was sort of sagging a bit. The interfacing will help keep it from doing that over time. And again, we're going to French seam the pockets even. We're really going all the way. So we're going to, again, right side to right side, which feels awfully backwards, especially when you're doing the pockets. So just kind of keep your head in the game and double check yourself as you go, because I've done this backwards more than once. So same process, just work it through the same way. Pressing that seam nice and flat. Making sure it's really smooth, even pinning it in place here. It's kind of nice to hold it flat while it cools, because that really helps set it in place. And then running it back through the machine yet again. So we're doing something a little different here. So I'm actually understitching still this seam allowance towards the pocket, just like I would a pocket not finished with a French seam. So I'm just tacking that French seam back to the pocket in the same way you would if it was like a nice open seam, if that makes sense. And then again, just double checking myself there. You can see me flip it back around because we have to go right side to right side, and this pocket looks like it's going to be backwards. But you could tell I was doing the mental gymnastics there just to try and figure it out. So I'm just going around the side and the bottom, the side facing into the skirt, so like skirt side and bottom of the pocket, the side that's going to be attached to the skirt and the top are all going to get caught in that seam allowance later. So that's not a big deal. It's just this bottom and the side that's floating free in the skirt that need to be finished off. So I'm just trimming them down. Really nice and short. Here, you don't want to catch it too close. She can have issues later, but... And then I'm just making sure I've got that corner and everything really pressed smooth into that pocket with the iron. So I'm going in as close as I can to that corner and then pressing it out. So again, you can see that side is open there towards the skirt. And that makes this possible, obviously, when you go to do this with a French seam. I find square pockets like this are the easiest to French seam because you're not worried about trying to make that bend. And again, we're just going to go around the second set of stitches. And then lift and spin and go around that bottom. So that's a nice completed pocket there. So I just thought I'd bring you out here onto the ironing board and just show you what I'm doing for the pleating here. So I have the front of the skirt and I'm working on 1/2 at a time. And so all I'm doing is pleating it down to 1/4 of my waist measurement plus 1/2 inch for my seam allowance. So I'm just using this wooden ruler here to mark it out. Ideally, you want to use something that's like wood or metal that won't melt if you get any sort of steam on it. And I've got it all pleated down here using some glass-headed pins. So that's what these red guys are. And I actually just pinned right through my ironing board. That's just kind of the easiest way to do it. And then I've gone through after I've ironed it and pinned vertically. So that'll hold it in place once I pull these guys out. So yeah, really nice and easy. This one worked out pretty well. You end up basically having a box pleat in the center, and then I've pleated them all this way, but you can pleat them however you like, in whatever style and thickness you like. These are 1 inch thick. Usually I like my pleats a little bit bigger. 1 inch is probably the smallest I go. And then this pocket bag here, I'm just gonna flip back over and probably baste that in as well with my pleats. This way it doesn't get caught in the pleats and adds more bulk and disrupts them, but also still ties them into that waistband to hold that pocket super firm. So that's kind of my preferred way. And yeah, I've also used a little bit of spray starch here just to help iron them down and keep them nice and flat. Especially on something like this that's poly, that's not ironing super well for me. This just kind of helps hold it in place and keep those pleats in place. So the other thing I also did out here was I have pre-ironed in my hem as well. So just putting that in nice and easy. I'm not going to sew that down yet, but that'll give me a guideline for later while it's still flat, which makes it a lot easier to do this before it turns into a round thing. So yeah, so I'm just going to go ahead and pleat the other side, and then we're going to get back on the sewing machine and baste this all together. So I just thought I would show you, now that I've got this all pleated up here, along with my ruler. You can see here's that box pleat there in the middle. And then I've pleated towards the middle on this side and towards the middle on this side. And then that means on the outside, the pleats will radiate away from the center, which I think is a really nice look. Of course, you can do this however you like. If you want box pleats all the way around, or if you want, you know, if you do want gathers in the front, you're totally welcome to do that as well. And make these any size you want, of course, as well. So, but yeah, this is sticking close to the original Modcloth skirt, and also I just think it's a nice way of doing pleats. That way you've got kind of a flat section in the center. And I have this pocket folded away here. So I just have it tacked into the ironing board right now. You can see all my little glass head pins again here. So let's see if I can do this one-handed. So I'm just going to give this a little bit of a press. Oh, I don't think I sprayed it. Hold on. just going to use a little bit of my spray starch here. Give it a bit of a zhuzh. Hold these guys in place. And then I'm just give them a bit of a press down. Don't have to press very far, just this top bit where it's going to be in the waistband. So I'm just going to pin vertically through these before I take them off the board. If I can do this one-handed. So just like that. So I'm going to do that all the way down all my pleats, and then I'll pull it up off the ironing board. And that's kind of the easiest way I found to do this. Again, you can do it just without holding it into the ironing board and just marking it all the way down. Do whatever's the easiest for you. This is just my method. And then again, I'm going to pin this pocket nicely back out of the way. And one thing I forgot to mention here is you can see where that slash is, sort of. So that's where my slash pocket is. My last pleat ends there. So I'll have a little bit of space there, and then my seam allowance, of course. So when this is all done and pleated, you want this to be half your waist measurement plus 1 inch. So check it out. Now that it's all in together, taken off the board, look how pretty those pleats are. Looks wonderful. There's that center box pleat there, you can see, and then that nice little slash pocket. So we are good to go, and we can finally start putting this thing together. All right, so I am just going ahead and attaching my interface waistband to my pleated down front skirt panel. Now, I am cheating a little bit here because normally you would attach your 2 skirt panels together beforehand, as well as your 2 waistband pieces together, so that you could have the tension running around in the stitching on the waistband itself. But in this case, the elastic takes a lot of that tension away, and it makes it a little bit easier to insert the elastic. So I thought I would show you this kind of easier method, just because it allows you to keep everything on the flat just that little bit much more longer. And so we are just going ahead and attaching that. And then also basting down the pocket to the side seam so it's not flapping about later when we go to do our French seam. And now I am just gathering up my back skirt panel. So I'm running 2 long running stitches here because I realized I have 1 whole panel more than my waistband is in width. So this was a little bit of a mistake here, but no harm, no foul. I'm just gathering it down a little bit to that waistband. And then that means that that waistband gets to be a little bit smaller, so I'm not gathering so much with the elastic. And you really won't be able to tell once it is additionally gathered by having that elastic in there. So, and if you also wanted to do the front as gathers instead of pleats, that's kind of exactly the way you would do it. So just making sure that my gathers with my waistband matched up, and I'm making sure they're nice and even as much as I can. So just kind of brushing them along and then pinning the whole thing in place, starting out with the middle and the ends, and then further evening it out. And again, probably going towards the middle again and pinning and then marking my middle and just kind of working them out that way so that they're as smooth as I can get them. Again, not as big of a deal because that elastic will gather them again, but you know, we do what we can to make it nice. So just sewing that whole big back waistband onto my now gathered up panel. Just making sure, again, all those gathers are nice and even, taking out the pins as I go. And then pulling all those gathering threads out and giving it a little bit of press flat with my iron just so that it'll stay as I fold the waistband over top. Again, kind of pre-pressing here before we get into attaching it together. So again, we're doing a French seam for attaching our skirt panels together. So same idea, sewed right side to right side, and I'm pressing it out here. You don't need to do this if you were working with like a cotton or something. You wouldn't necessarily have to French seam it. You could pink it, of course, or if you've got a serger, you could do that. This is just special because I'm working with a special fabric. And again, this is a good project for special fabrics because it's pretty simple. So even if I was doing this in a lace or something, this wouldn't be that hard to pull off. So, you know, it's a good candidate for that. We're not trying to cut any crazy thing out of it. So now I am going down the whole length of the side. You can see I went through that waistband. So that'll keep it from shredding around my elastic all the way down to the end. Ignoring that hem that I pressed in previously. So that all we'll have to press is that one little section there. So I'm just top stitching along the waistband here. So that'll hold that internal flip down. So I flip the waistband over the raw edge. And then we're pinning it down. And now I'm threading the elastic through. So I left about a 2-inch slot on the interface side of the waistband. And then I'm threading the elastic through all the way on the other side. And you can see that big safety pin that I was using to thread it. And then just pulling it out of that seam. I have a little bit of trouble here at the end, just because that's where the bulk is. But then I'm pinning that whole seam flat and then just running that through my machine across the elastic, making sure to go over it a couple of times. Same thing on the other side, running across the elastic, giving it a bunch of back stitches in place. Make sure that elastic is being held really firmly in place. Basically using a stitch in the ditch in that seam. And then we're going to go across again, enclosing that last 2 inches where we threaded the elastic through on both sides. And there we go. So now we're getting into the final stretch here, just pressing that one little bit where we had that seam. And then pressing that hem flat again. If I'd planned better, I probably could have gotten the pocket out of this fabric. I didn't have to do a hem this deep, but I just like to on skirts like this. I feel like it gives it a nice final touch. You know, kind of gives them a bit of elegance because it gives you a bit of weight at the bottom of the skirt. So I like to put on a bigger hem if I can. I just think it, you know, helps the swish factor. So just going all the way along the end. You could, of course, hand stitch this as well, but in this fabric, I really wasn't going to risk it. I'd prefer a sharp sewing needle. And here we go into the final reveal. So you'll have to forgive me for this reveal. It's already getting super hot here in Texas, and it was about 1000% humidity this day, so my hair is really kind of crazy. But the skirt is still cute. I really love this skirt and how it turned out. It is really comfortable, and I think this is the perfect application for this fabric. I'm still getting a lot of swoosh here, despite not using a ton of fabric. And I mostly just left wondering why I haven't made a whole bunch more of these a lot sooner. I know this was a long one today, but I really wanted to go into detail of how to go through the entire process just because there isn't a pattern to follow. But I hope it was helpful to you guys. If you did stick all the way to the end here, please comment bobbin down below so I know you made it to the end. And while you're down there, please consider liking and subscribing. It does really help the channel grow and I would deeply appreciate it. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye, guys!